Last year when I spoke, my brother Lynn Allen was present. He said a few words and he has since passed away. As you know, I have wrote a book. Our Tennessee Mountain Home is the name of it. I am not the only writer in the family. He has wrote this song, and I have promised my family I will sing it, so I'm going to try. If I can't sing it, I'll read it. I pledge allegiance to the Lamb, the Son of God, the great I Am. He has carried me through this troublesome land, so I pledge allegiance to the Lamb. My life I lived in sin for many a year, but the Lord still loved. He was so near. He said, son, if you'll reach up, I will take your hand, and I will lead you through this sinful land. When I reached up, he touched my hand. I felt the nail scars in his hand. I saw the blood on Calvary he had shed for the lost like you and me. When the Lord saved me, oh what a new start. He gave to me a brand new heart. He still carries me through this sinful land, so I pledge allegiance to the Lamb. Okay. Sevier County has always been a Republican county. About the year of 1896, in a battle of getting rid of the Whitecaps, a Democrat was elected for sheriff. His name was Tom Davis. He won by a margin of 74 votes. He was considered the backbreaker for the execution of Ples Wynn and Catlett Tipton. They was Whitecaps. They were hanged in the Sevier County Courthouse, in the Sevier County Courthouse yard. It is said that 3,000 people waited within the little closure of the county jail. Several had been there overnight. After my grandpa Elijah Helton was killed by the Whitecaps when my dad was just 2 years old, my grandma and seven children tried to survive on the land at Wallens Creek, but they could not. They owned some land at Goose Gap and went there to live. Time went on, and when my dad was 19 and my mom, like 2 days, being 15, slipped off and got married. My grandma Ward didn't like it, but by the time she found them, it was too late to do anything about it. My dad and Mom first rented a house on Jess Starkey Holler near Goose Gap Road. They lived there until 3 children was born, being Mac, Zora, and Wilburn. By then, they had worked and skimped and saved enough money to make a down payment on 14 acres of land, joining the land where my Grandma Helton and Uncle George lived. The address then was Route 5, Box 77, Goose Gap Road, Sevierville, Tennessee. Dad built a 4-room house, and they lived there until the other 8 children was born. That was Elijah, Nellie, Juanita, Charlie, Olivia, Reese, Annis, and Lynn Allen. The 4-room house was made out of rough lumber. Dad built the chimney out of rocks picked up off of the land. There was no cement to be had. But in the community there was a place that stayed damp the year around, where there was a special kind of mud that come in really handy. Dad used that to build the chimney, and it lasted. I remember when the old house was tore down and the chimney was still standing. Us kids would get that mud and roll it out like marbles and heat it in the ashes at the fireplace. After it got so hot, they was like marbles. You could put them in water and they would not melt. We called them Pigeons. The kitchen was a good-sized room. Dad had made a long table long enough to seat 13 and sometimes company. At the back of the table he also built a wooden bench and nailed it to the wall where us kids sat on it and we couldn't turn it over. There was no screen doors. Dad kept 2 good hunting dogs. They were disciplined. They knew better than to come in the house. At the bottom of the kitchen door was a 4-inch square. We called it the cat hole. The cats could come and go as they pleased. They never got on the beds or the chairs. They come in handy keeping the mice and snakes away. We had no ice boxes or refrigerators. Our cook stove had a reservoir where we kept full of water to wash dishes and other things. The stove also had a warmer where we kept leftovers. But sometimes there would be food left on the dining table covered over with a cloth. There was one time when the cat got on the table and my brother Mac threw a fork and stuck it up in the cat. The cat run off and didn't come back until the next day with the fork still in it. We had a hard time getting it out. We had a good spring down the hill on Uncle George's property. We had to carry water to drink and cook and wash dishes. We had 2 50-gallon wooden barrels we left in the drip of the house to catch water, to take baths and scrub floors and other things. At the spring is where Dad set up the big iron wash kettle where Mom done our laundry and sometimes gave us little kids a bath. At the spring, Dad had built a spring box where we kept milk, butter, and other things that had to be kept cool. He had to keep a lid secured on it from dogs and other animals. We had a large front porch where we spent many happy hours after supper listening to the night sounds. Maybe Uncle George would come over and talk a while. Us kids always enjoyed the things they talked about, smelling the aroma of a large lilac bush that we had in our yard, being careful not to jump off of the high end of the porch where there was 8 beehives. When my sister Annis was about 2-year-old, she slipped out the back door and around the house and was between 2 beehives. She started screaming bloody murder. My sister Zora was on the front porch and jumped off and picked her up and ran around the house. My dad and Mom met her and started picking the bees off. I guess you know bees, when they sting, leave the stinger in, you have to pick them out. Dad and Mom quickly got cool water and baking soda to help dull the pain. Annis had over 20 stings. She was a sick little girl. My dad had to build a barn out of logs to keep the horses and cattle in, plus some of the hay. He also took the hole diggers and dug a deep hole and put a long pole and anchored it down. Then he stacked the hay around it in a way that it would shed water. I never could do that, but he knew how to stack it where it would shed water. He had to build a crib to store the corn in. It took a lot of corn to feed the horses, cows, pigs, and chickens, and us kids. Of course, he had to build an outside toilet where he nailed a Sears and Roebuck catalog up to use for toilet paper. I always was afraid there would be a snake in there. All that time, my Grandma Helton and Uncle George lived next door. They had sheep, and my grandma had a spinning wheel. When they sheared the sheep, Grandma would spin the wool into thread, then knitted it into socks and sweaters. They was the ugliest things you've ever saw. but I had to wear them socks to school. As quick as I got outside of home, I'd roll my stockings down. But when I got to school, my teacher would make me roll them back up. She said if your mom hadn't wanted you to roll them up, she wouldn't have put them on you, so I had to mind her. My brother Charlie has Grandma's spinning wheel today. He's kept it. Uncle George and my dad always worked together. Two can do things much easier than one. We were lucky to have walnut, hickory nuts, and persimmon trees, and wild grapes and muscadines on our land. And in the spring we had greens called creases, the best you'll ever eat. Plus we had poke greens. My dad could graft trees and grapevines. We had a wealthy Uncle Charlie who had a grape vineyard and apple and peach orchards. So he gave my dad twigs of them, and soon we had apple and peach orchards and a grape vineyard. Mom canned and dried fruit and made jams and jellies. Plus we raised cane and made molasses. We had hunting dogs where my dad went hunting for rabbits, squirrels, and turkeys for food. Plus he killed possums, foxes, and groundhogs and other animals, and he tanned their hides. Once a year he took them in town and sold them. To tan the hides, he had different sizes of boards he stretched them on. He had to stretch them on wrong side outers in order to tan them like they're supposed to be. And we got most of our money that come from the tithes and the tobacco that we growed. By that time, Mortar Branch School was closed and Dad had bought the land. The more land you own, the more tobacco you could raise and sell. My dad had little education, being only 2, when his dad got killed. Back then, there was few schools. My mom was raised in Knoxville, and she went to school, and she taught Dad enough for him to get by. She taught him different things. Dad was a good manager. He taught us kids by the time we could carry a hoe, we was out in the fields, bursting clods and cutting down weeds. He taught us how to use a gun. He put wooden matches up on a picket fence and let us see how many matches we could strike with a .22. Today I live by myself and I keep a gun at my front door, and I know how to use it. My dad was a community miller. Saturday was a busy day. Everyone brought their corn to be ground into meal. He had a building where the mill was set up. Did you ever smell fresh ground meal? It smells good. Dad was a blacksmith. He could heat a piece of metal and use a anvil and hammer and shape it any way he needed to. He put new shoes on their horses and mended their gears. He could dehorn cattle and castrate animals. He had an iron lace, so he mended their shoes, put new soles on them, or if they was ripped, he would sew them up. He was also a barber. He cut hair with scissors and hand clippers. Most people back then had no clippers. Us kids started cutting each other's hair when we was young. Today, my sister Annis is my beautician. We were lucky all the way around. Our mom and dad kept us in church. They didn't allow any bad talk or alcohol around our house. My mom and dad tried to keep 2 or 3 milk cows to furnish milk, butter, and sometimes cottage cheese. They kept 6 or 7 beehives so we could have honey the year round. Believe it or not, none of us was never too fat. We kept it knocked off of us. My dad put new handles in his tools. He kept hickory, dogwood, and oak handles hung up, getting seasoned out. He also had the cradle he used to cradle the wheat hanging in the attic of the shop. He raised cane to make molasses. He had a cane mill where the neighbors could bring their cane to be ground and made into molasses. Dad always brought the molasses pan in and hung it up in the attic of the shop. He stored it for next year. Dad always sowed enough wheat till we could have biscuits and pies and cakes the year around. Some of our neighbors only had biscuits on Sunday morning. I remember one of our neighbor's boys come up to our house one Saturday evening. He said, "I can't wait till in the morning we're going to have good old biscuits." Had to have cornbread for breakfast. That'd be awful. The wheat thrashers always come to our place to thrash the wheat. Dad had built a rack where they blew the straw into. We used the straw for many things. When Dad built the house, he dug a cellar, a low place under it, and he put straw in there, and we held up potatoes and carrots and cabbage and apples and pumpkins and onions, and then covered it over with the straw. We had no mattresses. Nobody in the neighborhood had any mattresses. And we had bed ticks, they called it. We had to change the straw in that ever so often. Way back then, there was little bugs called chinches or bed bugs. We had to be very careful because we could get them at school. Every day when we got home from school, Mom would lay a white cloth down and we would have to bend over and comb our hair with a fine-tooth comb. She would not let us bring books home from school because there would be chinches or their eggs between the papers. Say, how about homework? You couldn't bring no books home. School was for learning. When we got home, we had to get wood in and water up for the night, slop the hogs, gather the eggs, and on and on. No use to bring no books home. Once a year we had a real house cleaning, usually in late August, where we took everything out of the house except the dining table and cook stove, having plenty of eagle eye and scalding water. We scalded the bed slats and everything we dared to. Took all the paper off the walls and ceilings and burned it. Back then we used newspapers to paper houses for insulation. Where did we get newspapers? One family in the neighborhood took the paper and saved it and sold it to people to paper their house. My sister Juanita told me you could paper a medium house for 50 cents worth of that. We scalded everything we could. That was when we put new straw in the bed ticks and under the house. It was late summer when we done that, so all the vegetables that we had stored down there was eat up. Then we had to repaper the walls and ceiling using meal and hot water to make paste to stick it up with. Then we had to carry everything back in. It was like a new house. Did you ever go into an empty house and holler out? You will get an echo. Try it sometime. Us kids look forward to sleeping way up high with a straw in the beds. We wonder we hadn't fell out and got hurt. Back to the schools in Goose Gap. The first school in Goose Gap was Mortar Branch, located on 1431 Mortar Branch Road, just off of Goose Gap. I have a picture showing 71 children and 2 teachers. We wondered where did 71 children live in walking distance. We got to thinking, my dad had 11 children, my Uncle George had 11, and my Uncle Johnny had 16. The picture I have has the names of the students. 4 of my siblings are in that picture, being Mac, Zora, Wilburn, and Elijah. The teachers are Edith Davenport and M.W. Tywaters. The water supply at the school was a cistern or a hand-dug well. There was 2 of them in the community. One at the home of Jim and Etta Whaley, located off of Goose Gap. I never knew why they closed the school, but I do know my dad was able to buy the property, and it is still owned by my dad's youngest son and his family. And by the way, the first property Mom and Dad own is still owned by my brother Reese's children. After Mortar Branch School was closed, they had school in the old Missy Helton house at 2046 Goose Gap Road. I have a picture to support that. We also had church there before Mountain View Missionary Baptist Church was organized, October the 8th, 1933. I was 4 years old. My brother Wilburn joined the church that day. And as I have already said, my grandma Ellen Helton joined that day along with her son George, who was on the building committee. After Mortar Branch School closed, I do not know why. Time passed, and they built Bluff Mountain School at 2046 Goose Gap Road. The lumber they built Bluff Mountain School with came from Elkmont. That was when they were closing businesses and moving homes out of the Great Smoky Mountains. It had become a national park. So there's where we got the lumber to build Bluff Mountain School. My husband pastored a church in Wires Valley named Valley View. The material to build that church was once a church in Elkmont. They had took it down and moved it to Wires Valley and named it Valley View. Several of the Owenbys also lived in Elkmont and relocated in Wires Valley. Did you ever hear of Lem Owenby? If you didn't, you need They have now built a new church at Valley View and still use the old church. It is still used and well kept, with a name on the front door proudly saying, Little Elkmont. I have a picture of that church. The first well ever dug in Goose Gap was at Bluff Mountain School. My dad's property joined the Bluff Mountain School, and today one of my dad's grandsons owns the Bluff Mountain School property. I was born in Goose Gap, and even though I have moved off for short periods of time, I have always come back. Today I lived at 2130 Goose Gap Road. From my property, I can see the property I was born on. My dad's grandchildren owns and lives on that property. Got a bunch of them. My grandma Helton and her 3 sons and their wives are all buried in the Mountain View Church Cemetery. Talking about where did all those school children come from. My grandma Helton had 7 living children. Number 1 was Donnie Helton. She married David Carnes. They had 1 child that just lived a short time. Number 2, Margaret Helton married Ed Breeden. They had 3 children, Frank, Georgie, and Ella. Number 3, Sally Helton married Charlie Schuler. They had 4 children, Ada, Ray, Iva, and Loie. Number 4, Murray Helton had 1 son, Maynard Helton. She married Oscar Ward. They had 6 children, Luther, Os, Bates, Bruce, Raj, and Alma. Number 5 was Johnny. Johnny first married Molly McClure. They had Otis, Boyd, and Hobart. Second time he married Laura McGill. They had Ernest Goob Helton. He lived on Wallens Creek for years. Both of these first women had another child, which mother and child died in childbirth. Back then, they didn't have a doctor when they had to give birth. They was lucky if they had a granny woman to tie the biblical cord. So there were several of the mothers and the childs died. The third marriage, Uncle Johnny married Martha England. They had Carl, Alma, Bill, Arthur, and Oscar, that was twins. Clyde, Margie, Lillian, Murray Bell, and Elmer. When World War II broke out, 4 of Uncle Johnny's boys had to go into battle. They all made it back, but the youngest one, his name was Clyde. He was killed and buried over there. But time passed and they brought his body back, and he is buried at Mountain View Baptist Church Cemetery. Number 6, Uncle George married Sally England. They had Lloyd, Jesse, Pauline, and Willie Paul, which was twins. Verna Lee, Glenn, Johnny, Wilfred Roy, and Willard Coy, another set of twins. Gerald E. and Harold Irwin. Number 7 was my dad. William Bill married Hiretta Carolyn Ward. They had Mac, Zora, Wilburn, Elijah, Nellie, Juanita, Charlie, Olivia, Reese, Annis, and Lynn Allen. If I am correct, and I think I am, my grandma Helton had 53 grandchildren. Whew. There was no divorces in those children. When I was 15 and 16 years old, my oldest sister Zora's husband died, leaving her with 2 children, 3 and 5 years old. She needed someone, so I went to live with her on this side of the river at Pine Grove. I had to finish my school years out at Bluff Mountain. It was 5 miles away. Up the Divide Road, on to New Era, then on to Goose Gap, on to the school. My brother Charlie owned a bicycle and let me use it. There was no way I could walk and get there on time. I have a certificate saying that I was neither absent or tardy. You know, those winters must have been mild or I could never made it. Now, my sister that I went to live with cooked and heated her house with wood, and they had trees on their property. Me and her would take the children and a wheelbarrow and a crosscut saw and an axe and cut down a tree and cut a few blocks, and then she would make me rest while she split them. She always shielded me. We kept on till we brought all that wood to the house in the wheelbarrow. She owned a cow and chickens and a good garden. She had a chicken coop where she kept a mother hen and baby chicks. The little chicks began to disappear. She set a steel trap, and one morning she had caught an eagle, and she killed it with a hoe. It was almost 5 feet from wingtip to wingtip. She taught me many things. She made the first dress I ever felt like I was grown up in. It had a sailor collar. She was finally able to build a new house on the other side of the river near Shiloh Baptist Church and Pine Grove School. Her son David was old enough to go to school, but he was afraid. He had had a sheltered life. He hadn't been out in public much, and he was just afraid to go to school. So you know what? I went to school with him, and I enjoyed it, and I met a lot of lifelong friends there. After I was married, me and my husband had gone to North Carolina, and when we come back, I went by my mom's. She gave me an envelope and said Zora had left it for me. I said, "Why did she leave it?" Mom said she owed it to you. I told my husband I had to go to see Zora, and when I went, I said, "Why did you leave this for me?" She said, "I can never pay you back for all you have done for me." I said, "No, I'm the one that can never pay you back for all the things you have done for me." She had taught me to cook and sew and keep house, and she taught me the ways of life. Her son grew up to be a Baptist preacher. He called me his second mom. He has since passed away. He was the Reverend David Montgomery. Zora's daughter is a registered nurse. Zora got Lou Gehrig's disease, and she passed away at the age of 66. By the time I got back home to live, my dad had built a new house. Now, I say this, I don't brag, but it was the nicest one in Goose Gap back then. He was the first one that was able to build a real nice house. But I had an Uncle Charlie, and he had a brother Manker who was carpenters. They built houses for a living. They had come up and helped Dad. And you know what? My nephew still owns and lives there. It has been well kept and it's still in good shape. But I did get back home in time to help Dad build the new barn. I remember being way up on the tip top of that barn, handing my dad nails and planks and tools. I was as happy as a coon. World War II broke out and my brother Elijah had to go. He was sent overseas. He was there at the Rhine River when it was blown up. Sometimes it would be days and we would not hear from him. The weather was hot. Mom and Dad would stay out in the hot sun working and worrying. Dad had a heat stroke and he was never really well after that. He died at age 60, younger than anyone in our family when they died. After Dad had been dead 15 years, my mom married Lee Mars, a man who years back him and his family was our neighbors in Goose Gap. He had a real good wife and children. He had gone to work at Alcoa in Blount County and got a chance to buy a farm below Merville where he wouldn't have to travel so far to work. His wife died. She was a real good woman. She used to be my Sunday school teacher. Time passed and Lee started coming back to church at Mountain View. He was a deacon there when the church was organized in 1933. One Saturday, him and Mom went to Bryson City, North Carolina, and got married. Us kids was hit with a brick wall. My brother's wife told me she had never heard one of their children cry like Reese cried. As quick as I heard it, I told Bethel, I have to go to Reese. I knew he would be hurt. He was always so tender-hearted. Time passed and we got over it. Lee's children was really good to Mom. Mom's eyesight was not good, so I started going there cleaning house every Thursday. One day I said to Lee, you just treat me like a stepchild. He looked at me so funny, then he started laughing. I think he would have done anything in the world he could for me. He asked Mom to be buried by him, and she told me she told him no, she was going to be buried by my dad. I told Lee, if you want a war to break out, you just mention that again. Wherever you saw Mom, you saw Lee. Washing dishes, hanging out clothes, swinging in the porch swing. One night at supper time, they had just sit down, hadn't started eating. Lee's head went back. He was gone. My mom's heart was bad, and they had to take her to Blount Memorial Hospital. She stayed a few days, then went to live with my brother Elijah and his family. My dad, William Andrew Helton, born March the 28th, 1892. My mom, Harrietta Carolyn Ward Helton, born June the 27th, 1896. They were married June the 25th, 1911. Dad died October the 25th, 1952, age 60. Mom died February the 5th, 1982, age 85. The ones who had toiled in the fields, in the shops, grinding at the mills, currying horses, sharpening tools, washing dishes, cooking meals, cutting hair, raising 11 children, teaching us the ways of life, had laid down their heavy load and went home. Treasured seasons. For everything there is a appointed season, and a time for everything under the heavens, a time for sharing, a time for caring, a time for loving, a time for giving, a time to remember, a time for parting. God has made everything beautiful in its time, for everything you do remaineth forever. Eyes have not seen, ears have not heard, neither has it entered into the hearts of man what God has in store for those who love and serve him.